We have started recording.
Got it. I spoke with Adrian about an hour ago. He has to work, but he would like to, he can't participate, so he asked if somebody could record it. So
Oh, good.
he'll appreciate it. So
Yeah, okay. Well, might as well get started. I mentioned my name is Steve Unkrich. I go by Steve and Robert on Facebook, but we have our first official meeting on Zoom, talking about Washington Franklin's series 1908 to 1922. With us, we've got several people of note. Andrew Kelly, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, I'm Andrew Kelly. I live in Denver, Colorado. Collected the Washington Franklins for longer than I can I can remember. These days, I'm spending a lot of time thinking about the offset Washington Franklins. I've got an exhibit of those. I'm working on a book about them. So spent way too much time playing with the offsets. And yeah, been thinking I've known Steve since I was like 15. So we won't talk about how long ago that was.
wow.
And Bob Ruff, you introduce yourself and a little bit about you.
Yeah, just shortly, I've been a collector since I was a kid. My dad was a postmaster in a little place called Sellersville, Pennsylvania. And both of his parents were postmasters in Rigglesville, Pennsylvania. And I've done a couple of things, I guess most notably special handling, which is a 1920s issue, but the service just ended last July 9th. So I prepared a whole bunch of last day of service covers, did rate change covers and exhibited 8 frames of that for a while, but shifted into booklet paper, again, 4th Bureau, 1920s type material. But I've always been a U.S. collector, Washington Franklin's, certainly 1909, 1921. And the booklet paper thing project took me into booklets. And now I've gotten sucked into another big hole that positions and plate numbers and varieties and EFOs and everything else. So I'm just going to do it for fun and see where it takes me.
Good. Okay. Well, first off, unfortunately, Greg cannot, I guess he's helping his contractor. They're doing some remodeling the house, but Greg is also a very well-known exhibitor for the Washington Franklin. He specializes in the coil issues, the flat plate coil issues, and as his exhibit has won some champion awards, and it's also featured on the APS website as one of the exhibits you can actually scroll through to see what he's put together. Well, we have a few more people showing up. How many people here have the template that I made? Ron, yeah. Okay. Heidi, I know has it. Jim, Joseph, do you have that?
I do. Yep. Yeah. I
Good,
love it.
okay.
I do not have a template.
You don't, okay. Andrew, can you put up you have a picture of the template?
I don't. I mean, I can hold it up close to the screen, but that's about the best we can do.
Okay,
Oh, shoot. I had a picture earlier. Let me see if I can find
Yeah,
it.
someone had a scan of it. I
I
don't.
did.
thought he
Let me
did.
see if I can find it.
That's mine. Probably better if I showed it that way though.
Let me see.
okay.
Here.
Well, Joel, it's the template is basically showing all the different sizes: flat plate, rotary, vertical, horizontal, as well as the sizes of the booklet stamps for both the third bureau and the fourth bureau stamps.
There we go.
Ah.
Can you see that?
Yes,
Very
we can.
nice.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Scotty.
Yep.
And what the template does, it also has a perf gauge on it that was actually made from actual stamps. As you might know, most perf gauges, when the stamp says perf 11, people go to a regular perf gauge, not using a Casales or specialist gauge, and the gauge is certainly fine enough, but it won't tell you if perforations are fake. You do need what's called a Casales gauge, which uses a series of dots. I'll see if I can hold this up. This is the Casales gauge, and this actually uses the exact perforation that the Bureau used for perforating stamps. So perf 11 is not actually 11, it's 10.94, and all the different perforations are some sort of fraction of what Scott uses. So perf 12 is, what is that, 11 point? You remember, Andrew? There it is, okay. 11.92.
11.92.
Yes, so
Yep.
this is why the specialist gauge is so important with Washington Franklin's, and the specialist gauge is also called the Casales gauge. But the template that I made is actually using stamps from the Washington Franklin's, so you're getting the exact gauge that you need to properly gauge Washington Franklin's. On the right side of the template, I provided basically a little synopsis of the rare stamps that you might think you might be looking at. And the way the gauge works is you match the size, you match the perforation, and if you notice, just look down at the bottom. On this particular gauge, if you're looking for a 596, which is the bottom one, the 1 cent on the bottom on the right side, it says to use the stamp that's marked 606, which is in parentheses. It needs to be perf 11. And if it matches the 606 in size and it's perf 11 and it's a 1 cent stamp from the fourth bureau issues, you've got a 596. The number of dollar signs indicates that it's, that actually catalogs $250,000. So each dollar sign is a multiple of 10. For the Washington Franklin's, it's 5. If you go up to 544, just match it to the stamp that's marked 486. And if it's perf 11 all the way around, 1 cent Washington Franklin, you've got the 544. So the gauge can be used to figure out any of the stamps in the series, except you do have to type the stamp if it's a 2 cent stamp, usually in a rotary format, and if it needs to be watermarked. Obviously, I can't put watermark in a template like this, but I was providing a watermark, both single line and double line, on transparency. So you could, if you think you see part of a watermark, you can also, yeah, there they are.
Yeah. Are those
That's
right out of
actually-
the expert book?
Yes, that did come out of the expert book. So basically those are actual sizes. So if you think you see part of a watermark, you basically take the transparency, overlay it where the part of the watermark is that you think you recognize, and it should tell you where there could be watermarks on other parts of the stamp. I've used the template very successfully, finding AEF booklet stamps on cover, which were the special booklet panes that were sent to our armed forces in France during World War I. And you know, they're booklet stamps, but they came from a pane of 30, and there's almost all the positions are identifiable and distinguishable from the regular booklet pane of 6. So any questions about the template?
I got a question.
Yeah.
You mentioned the bottom right-hand corner there where the rarity stamps are. The last one, you said that a perf 11 and a 606 looks like it could be a 596. My template says in parentheses 634.
Right. Yeah. Each one, I think Scotty had one of my earlier ones.
I
And
think it-
so as I refined it a little bit, I started using 634 or 632 for that space.
Okay.
492 up in the top left-hand corner of that could also be, I used 490. But again, it doesn't make any difference if it says 606 or 634. That stamp that is in parentheses on the right, the number that's on the right, will correspond to a stamp that's on the left side of the template.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Any other questions about the template? Okay, I mean, it's fairly self-explanatory. Has anybody had any luck using it, either at shows or otherwise?
Oh, yes, I have.
I believe Mark Eisen also said he has taken it to shows and used it as well.
Yeah, good.
Yep.
All right, we've got, we're up to 18 people.
18 people.
So let's see. Any other areas specifically in Washington Franklin's that somebody has questions about? You have to
Would it-
unmute.
would it,
unmute.
Would it be appropriate? I mean, probably, you know, what's the best way to just start from beginning to end? You know, using your template, like first things to the steps, first things to identify, to just sort of get through the, you know, when you have bags of stamps, you know, what do you recommend? Just step by step going through without necessarily even having to use the template. Just go, hey, oh, that's
Yeah. Identify the design, check the
Yeah.
purpose, check watermarks, right? What's a procedure for somebody new, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, I think it's going to be a little bit different for each person. It depends on really on how you think. When I'm identifying, even my thought process is very visual. I'm not thinking in my mind about a list of possibilities. When I look at a stamp, I tend to look at first if it's rotary or flat, and usually that puts me in a timeline about where that stamp was printed. You'll get to the point where you'll be able to recognize perf 10 from perf 11 from perf 12 pretty quickly. But for me, the first thing is rotary or flat. Flat plate is just about going to be one size. Once you get that, you perf it, and then once you have that, if it's necessary, you can, you may have to watermark or type it, but I don't want to leave Andrew out. You also have offset. So
So
the offset printing,
what does offset refer to?
say it again.
What does offset refer to?
The type, go ahead, Andrew.
Oh, yeah, sorry. So during World War I, the US couldn't get good German printing ink, and the crappy American ink wore out the engraved plates faster than the Bureau could replace them.
Yep.
And so they tried for the first time using offset lithography. So it's a lithographic printing instead of engraved printing for stamps.
So, so the offset printing is the second group of printings. They
The
follow
third
the
set.
regular printings.
It's-
And
Stamps
And
are,
the
It kind of came in the middle. Yeah.
the
They
middle-
made
and
they had engraved stamps for a while, then offsets, and went back to engraved.
so,
Uh-huh.
so a given Scott number can come both offset and litho?
no,
The Scott numbers are different. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
so then why doesn't Steve's chart handle that whole issue?
T-Star just does size and perforation, and they're the same size and the same perforation, so they don't really fit on the chart.
well, the new template does have an offset stamp on it. It is a slightly different width, I believe, than a flat plate.
Well, they're all of them are different sizes, actually. All the types are slightly different sizes. But
Yeah. So I did put offset on there, and once you get used to looking at the stamps, you'll be able to identify an offset stamp pretty readily. Not so much from
Flat.
a picture. A lot of people misidentify stamps thinking that they have number 500 instead of a 528B when they're looking at a photo. But when you have the stamp in hand, an offset stamp will be very smooth. You can't feel the lines that you might in an engraved stamp. And it sort of has for the most part, a washed out look to it.
them's fighting words.
I was gonna say, I'm watching
It's
Andrew.
really beautiful that you know it's an
Watching
offset stamp.
Is
I
the,
think, I mean, you can look at them and see that they just look different, but the thing I use is if you get your thumbnail or your fingernail,
Yep.
just drag it across the surface of the
Right.
stamp or even a stamp tongue. If it's an engraved stamp, you'll feel the lines as your finger crosses them. Like you can sort of feel that the surface is rough, sort of like a dollar bill, right? You can feel the ink on a dollar bill. The offset is going to be perfectly smooth.
is the offset that's vertically shorter than a flat plate yet, isn't it?
I think all of the offsets are just slightly different sizes, but a lot of them are very close to the size of the flat plate. I think you're thinking of the rotary press where there's a more pronounced size difference.
Yeah, and I've measured offset against flat plates too, and I seem to see a little difference there.
They're probably slightly different, but it's going to be, at least for most of them, if I recall correctly, it's tenths of a millimeter. So it's,
Very small, but he's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or they could be booklets that shrunk different.
yeah, or rotary press.
Mhm.
Joel, when you're trying to measure, what are you measuring with?
I would just compare an offset to a flat plate, but I've got some specialist gauges too.
How
Yeah.
accurate?
Well,
measure to?
I don't know if this is the forum that I was on, but somebody told me to upgrade because my plastics might shrink or over time. I
Yeah,
have a plastic gauge with all those different specialty perfs, you know, how you can discern an 8.5 coil, that's
Talk about
really
that one?
8.3. Yeah, that's the one.
Right, yeah, unfortunately, that some of the versions 5.2 and 8.3, at least on the ones that I've compared, the plastic has shrunk and you don't get an accurate reading. But if you're comparing two stamps, if you're getting different readings, it just might not be an accurate reading, but they could still be different. I use a stage micrometer, which has increments of 1/10 of a millimeter, except for the last centimeter goes down to 1/20th of a millimeter, which you actually need magnification to see something that small. So, but that's about the most you'll need for Washington Franklin's. Anything smaller than that, you're putting it under a microscope.
Steve, if you're talking about offset identification, it's worthwhile mentioning that reflected light. If you hold a stamp up, we all have lights, incandescent or otherwise. If you hold it at a certain angle to the light, the appearance on the surface of an offset is so totally different than an engraved stamp that is the surefire, easiest way to identify an offset without any regard to perforations or other aspects to the stamp.
Okay, so Bob, what does an offset look like when you're holding it up? What does it look like?
I hate to use the term, but it has a very flat appearance to it, not to be confused with a flat printing.
I'm
But,
thinking in the art world, if you look at a lithograph and you hold it to the light, you'd see it's flat. There's
Yeah.
no,
That's exactly right. The surface is
and
perfectly
valleys.
smooth.
Yeah.
A perfectly
so-
smooth, non-reflective surface and an engraved stamp, all those ridges that you referred to earlier, they show some difference in the texture, almost like a texture of the stamp rather than a smooth appearance.
Right.
And
The other factor,
a little practice goes a long way in differentiating, and then it's really easy to tell.
Steve,
once you look at, Bob's right, once you look at a few of them, you'll be able to quickly sort offsets and flat plates and rotaries by eye. That they all three just look different. So if you get stuck too, like send Steve or send me a cell phone snap or a scan. It's pretty easy to tell them apart.
There's enough variability in printing that some of them may have similarities, but with enough practice, they're pretty easily distinguished.
Right.
What was that?
Joel, anything else?
No, I've always been able to discern that pretty easily. I just, I noticed booklet panes too are different than a sheet stamp, correct?
I'm sorry.
Are booklet pane singles, when you match them up to a sheet stamp, they're different too, aren't they?
Yes, they are different. Bob, you want to say something about the booklets?
Well, the dimensions are different because the grain of the paper, they ordered paper for booklet pane printing differently than sheet stamps because they could control shrinkage and get better centering if they had horizontal grain paper. And accordingly, booklets will, even though they're flat plates, will look a little bit more like rotary stamp measurements. They will be generally wider. I'm talking about a vertical format stamp, like your 1 and 2 cent Washington Franklin's. Pick an easy number like a 4.99. The 2 cent red Washington measures ever so slightly wider. I don't know the numbers off the top of my head. Maybe a millimeter and a half wider. and almost imperceptibly shorter, but they are slightly different. And the template picks, do you have a template? I carry my own, actually, that's, I guess I have a coil in front of me, but I do the same thing for coils and booklets. I make my own templates and carry them to shows and so forth.
Yeah,
But if you get a $4.99 versus a $4.99 E booklet, and then, yeah, same idea, Scotty.
Keep it on my keyboard. It's easy.
Yeah, I keep them right on top of the keyboard all the time.
Yeah.
Get known stamps, cut the templates, and they're easy to carry and easy to measure.
yeah,
We'll often find people will claim, and this is an eBay terror, they'll claim to have things like a 300B booklet pane on cover, which is kind of a rarity, and they charge high prices when in fact they're just a sheet stamp 300 that has a margin straight edge,
Right.
not a booklet.
Hmm.
Happens all the time.
Mhm.
so it's, and like I was mentioning before, the booklet panes that were 498F and 499F came from booklet panes of 30 sent to France. And finding those on cover is considerably harder than any regular booklet pane from the pane of 6, or a booklet stamp from a pane of 6. So it's worth knowing the difference, having some type of template to tell the difference between a sheet stamp and a booklet stamp. And the booklet stamp is slightly narrower than the horizontal rotary coil.
Mhm.
So you basically have 3 different widths that you're dealing with. The most narrow being a sheet stamp from the flat plates, then the booklet stamp from the flat plates, and then the horizontal royal rotary, such as like a 492, which is slightly the widest of the 3.
Well, all I know is when I inherit, I'm a 3rd generation collector, and I have a bunch of my grandfather's holdings. And when I pulled a lot of his Washington Franklin coils out, I could tell right away they were fake because they were trimmed booklet panes, or just they didn't add up. But the booklet pane trimmed ones, those stuck out really bad.
Yeah. Now the early booklet panes have watermarks, and the watermark is vertical.
Vertical, yeah.
Okay, so and a vertical, and whereas a sheet stamp, the watermark is horizontal. So, and the way the terminology for describing a watermark is by how you actually read the watermark. So if a watermark is looks like it's laying on its side, you would be reading that watermark up and down, and that would be a vertical watermark. Whereas a watermark that goes, the U or S looks like it's standing straight up, you're reading it from left to right or right to left. So that would be a horizontal watermark.
So I've never watermarked a booklet pane, but if I wanted to, I'd have to get a new kind of container, because the container for stamps literally has a like a 2x2 square for fluid. But you don't do a
You can tell
watermarking
with
of
just one stamp just one stamp.
Hold
you
it
mean-
up to the light, you can see it without fluid.
Yeah,
You can get a tray.
You can also use the back of a 302 card to set it on one of these bad boys and dribble a
Safe
couple of
card.
drops of fluid
Yeah.
on it.
yeah. But that's if a stamp has a watermark, you can tell. That's a good way to tell if it's fake or not. Faked from a booklet pane is by simply checking the watermark.
Hmm.
If the watermark is vertical, it came from a booklet pane. If it's horizontal, it was once a sheet stamp.
Again, with a couple of exceptions. There are some rarities out there that make it worthwhile looking for. Like a 300B with a horizontal watermark is a rare
Yep.
stamp.
But I was talking mainly is talking about the Washington Franklins, but yes, the earlier ones, you could have both
Yeah.
orientations.
So last week when we were talking about coming up with ideas or subjects we wanted to cover, and one of them I wrote down was watermarks. Obviously, in the WF series, watermarks play a huge part in determining what Scott number we're dealing with. So I want to just I thought maybe we could talk about watermarks as a subject to go over. Not necessarily today, but I think it's something we should cover. And one of the things I found curious is just a couple of days ago, Noble Spirit put out a YouTube video where they interviewed William Crowe. Willie was at a stamp show. And I've always used a Rosinol fluid, letter fluid.
Yes, me
For the
too.
most part, does everybody use that? And the reason I'm bringing this up so we can have a conversation about it. William Crowe said he buys it by the dozens. He'll buy as much of that the lighter fluid as he can. He even mentioned Zippo. And I know there's people here that I've heard in our stamp groups that are like, do not use lighter fluid. Don't use this. Use watermark fluid. And if you've got one of the most noted expertisers out there using Rosinol, then it can't be that bad. So I wanted to hear, Stephen and Greg, some of you guys that have used watermark fluid for years. What do you
So
guys
here's my,
recommend?
My view about it is it's probably fine, but no one's quite sure, right? There can be some trace things there that are not great for your stamps, and it's super flammable. So if you have something like the Clarity watermark fluid the EPS developed that is, or some chemists have looked at it and think that it's archival and it's also not likely to burst into flames, like why take a chance? It's more expensive, but I watermark a lot of stamps and I use a bottle every couple of years. So I use Rossignol, but I use Clarity these days.
Clarity. Greg, Steve, what are you guys using?
The lighter fluid, I think, doesn't evaporate as quickly as Clarity does. And I use the lighter fluid. I have had one other person that I know of that says that lighter fluid will leave some sort of residue. I'm not sure what he was claiming it was leaving.
After Wayne Youngblood says it as well, because we've discussed it before.
Yeah, Wayne does not
Yeah.
like lighter fluid.
Yeah.
Feel
The other thing I
it.
wonder about is how, I don't anticipate that breathing in hydrocarbons from the lighter fluid is great for your long-term health.
Yeah.
It's better than the old benzene-based fluids. Remember, I remember when I was a kid, that all watermark fluid was pure benzene, which is like super carcinogenic.
Yes.
You can feel it after you've watermarked with Rosinol. You can feel a slight film on the stamp versus when you use Clarity watermark fluid. I've compared the two. Now, I don't know if that eventually evaporates and goes away, but you can feel a film, and that's what Wayne doesn't like. And I feel the same way about it.
I never touch stamps with my fingers. Sorry, I had to go there.
Yeah. No, and I also think, I guess most of the watermarking I do is as an expert. And I just think if it's someone else's stamp, I'll spend a little extra money and make sure that I'm using the product that's the least likely to harm it. Lighter fluid is probably fine. I'm sure I own a bunch of stamps that have been soaked in lighter fluid a bunch of times, but here, if it costs an extra half a cent per stamp, I'll pay the extra half a cent. And
That's fine.
peace of mind.
And
Well,
I also know
I-
Stephen and I have spoke on the phone several times, but a lot of times you might need to leave a stamp in the fluid submersed for up to 5 minutes before you see a watermark. So now you're using more of that fluid where Clarity
Sure.
might be a different. Yeah.
Clarity definitely evaporates quickly. But you can put a piece of clear plastic over the tray and slow down the
Evaporation rate. Okay.
But I remember a dealer in US Stamps telling me that the advantage of lighter fluid is that it keeps the back of the stamp visible longer. i.e.
Yeah,
evaporates more slowly. And
Yeah.
that's, I think, what Steve said a few minutes ago. So I'm just trying to think, none of the expediting people or the APS has never put out an article that included talking about watermarking fluids? Because I know they've done things on preservation of paper, chemical engineering level paper on things like that.
Greg, what do you use?
Well, I've used both, and I guess I could say from the, horse's mouth, Larry Lyons tells me that the PF buys it by the case,
Okay,
and they
He
use
buys
the
what
lighter
by the
fluid.
case?
What do
Yeah,
they buy?
and he says they will even put covers into it, trying to find the watermark.
I didn't
He
hear
puts-
what fluid they're using.
They use rosinol. They use the lighter
Rosinol.
fluid.
Okay, which is what William Crowe said. He tries to buy
Yeah.
it by the case, 12 at a time.
And I
And-
never
and-
went, I never went to a Walmart where they didn't have it in stock.
I tell you,
Yeah.
I had, I had what I thought was a 491 line pair. And I would put it in Clarity, and I could not get a watermark to show. And I swore up and down that it was 491 line pair. It took, Richard Champagne took a look at it at one time at a show, long time ago. And it took a good 3 or 4 minutes in lighter fluid for that watermark to show up. Could not get it to show up with Clarity. But sure enough, after a few minutes, nice big S right in the center of the stamp.
Was it regummed or something? That's strange.
I don't know, but it was I guess it was a light watermark or something, just not very well. Who knows what, but Clarity would not bring it up.
You're talking about Washington Franklin, Steve. Of course, APS gives a course in Washington Franklin's, and one of the activities is watermarking stamps. We watermark stamps, and as they were passed around, there were watermarks so many times that we found stamps with watermarks that were presented to us as being not watermarked. And I can't help but believe the more you watermark a stamp, you're building up a film, and it takes Roncinol or any watermark fluid longer to beat through that film to get to the watermark. Maybe that's why it takes 3 or 4 minutes. And a 491 is a great example, because you can have a faint watermark that you're pretty convinced it's going to be the stamp that the 491, let's say. And darn it, you're going to find that watermark if you have to leave it in there for 5 minutes.
Yeah,
They say that's the hardest one to expertise.
it is.
It's a nightmare.
Is that the yellow one?
No, it's the 2-cent rotary press, but the watermarks, if they're there, are super
The
faint.
type-
It's
type
crappy
2.
paper. Yeah. I've had increasing luck lately using the optical watermark detector. When I first bought it, I was super disappointed. I thought it was useless and too hard to see the watermark. But as I've experimented and put in more and more stamps in there just to train my eye, the watermarks look different. They're not always as obvious, but I've had a few patients that I've exercised where I had an easier time seeing the watermark with that detector than I did in fluid.
Okay, so you jumped ahead to my next question. Does anybody use any detection devices? And Andrew, you're saying you use the optical watermark detector?
Only as a last resort. If I'm having trouble seeing something in fluid, I'll pop it in the optical detector. The one I have has a bunch of different colors of light, which is very helpful, particularly for the like the
So
10
yellow
cent.
ink?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Exactly. It's not perfect. I never start with that, but I finish with it a lot of times.
Okay. Talking about little trade secrets here, Stephen, if you've got a yellow ink stamp, are you using a different color tray?
Yeah, I've got 7 or 8 different colored trays. And actually instead of a tray, I use a 4-inch glossy tile. Just picked them up from the tile shop down the road. You charge me $1 a piece or something for the tiles, but I've got 9 different colors, and sometimes a different color, one that's complementary to the stamp color
Mhm.
may show a watermark as, but again, it's something I'm using as a last resort.
What
Yeah,
color
it-
works best for yellow normally?
Well, I still think black is best for yellow, but Andrew, what have you coming up with? For yellow?
I like the optical for yellow because it's not nearly as influenced by the color of the ink. But yeah. Some people use those colored plastic filters too. I've never had a lot of luck with those, but I know some people who swear by those.
Hmm.
The translucent, like photographer color gels like you put on a
Yeah.
flash.
Mhm. Andrew, do you have that optical watermark detector nearby?
Yeah.
You can show us
I do.
real quick.
Let me get it here. Let's see. There's a couple of versions of optical detectors, but this is like the lighthouse version. You
Sherlock, right?
Sherlock, yeah. So you put there's a little slab here. You pull this out, put the stamp in there, in here, like kind of face down. Close it. I'm trying to do this backwards. You put it in the machine. There's a screw knob in the back that adjusts the pressure.
Yeah.
Somebody said more or less pressure will make the watermark more or less visible. You can look through there, and turn the light on. You can change I don't know if you can see that. You click through, there's a bunch of different colors.
Yep.
Everyone's, like I said, I wouldn't start with this ever, but every once in a while, you'll be able to see a watermark in here that's really hard to see in fluid.
Does it work well if there's a cancel over the watermark fluid? Does that help at all?
Sometimes.
Yeah, it just depends.
Yeah. I mean, I think the ideal for these really are like the British stamps where the watermark is so clear you almost don't need a watermark detector, but
Mhm.
I found it useful from time to time on the
Okay.
particularly difficult to watermark stamps.
Yeah, it does help when you decide you have to watermark a stamp. Check the front first. Recognize where the cancel is. Try to get a good feel when you turn the stamp over what the cancel actually looks like. So you're not confusing a dark cancel with a watermark when you
Right.
add the fluid.
The other thing I think is super helpful, I actually got this from Steve, so a plug for him. This is a piece of plastic that has a single line watermark pattern printed on it
Mhm.
in actual size. And it's super, super helpful to hold this over the tray or hold it over the watermark machine. And if you see a little line here and a little squiggle there, you can kind of puzzle out whether those lines actually match up with an actual watermark possibility. I find this enormously helpful.
And the other thing you need to remember is the watermark isn't necessarily always going to be left to right. It could be reversed. It could be inverted.
help?
Inverted, reversed. So, you take that sheet, you flip it around, turn it upside down, whatever. That you got 4 different orientations for what you could actually be looking at for a watermark for any given letter. So just don't expect to find a really nice looking S in the middle of the stamp where it would read from left to right.
Oh, yeah.
You might be looking at an inverted watermark or a reversed watermark. There was something else. Just slipped my mind now, but with watermarks.
Well, while you're thinking of it, Steve, I would say if you're trying to decide between a double line watermark stamp and a single line watermark stamp, if you have trouble seeing the watermark, your very strong presumption should be that it's single line.
Right.
The double
Yeah,
lines are thick, they're big. Yeah.
There's very little chance. The size of the letter and the amount of space that they take up.
Look at Scotty.
That's a fairly
Yeah, no.
decent representation.
Yeah, there's a
Yeah.
couple on there that you're scratching your head.
Yeah.
Right.
especially with cancels.
But if you were to show a double line watermark sheet,
Oh, I have that.
okay, if you could pull that up.
Yep. Yep. Let me pull it up. And let me see if I can share it here. And there.
Okay,
Oh.
Are you serious?
Mm-hmm.
here you can see where every single stamp, you're seeing a fairly decent portion of a letter. The letters are larger. And just by, I mean, it's called a double line watermark because you're seeing basically two lines making up any part of the watermark instead of just one line.
Yep.
Okay.
So where can you get a template like that?
Well, do you have the book called The Expert's Book?
Yes,
Just take it to the to a FedEx or a Staples and have them make a transparent copy of it. Just make a copy on a transparency. The watermark is in the back of the book. If you look in the
on regular size.
Yeah, just
Yeah,
have a copy of it
100%.
right out of the book.
Have them make it on
Copy
some
right out of the book.
acetate.
Okay.
It matter of fact, if for those who have the book called The Expert's Book, it is also very much worth reading
There.
the chapters in the back dealing with watermark and also the chapter dealing with measuring a stamp. There is a correct technique for measuring.
Yeah, design measurement.
Yes.
Yeah. It's on page 191.
A lot of people stretch their measurements. And if anybody who has tried to use a ruler that is too crude to really measure stamps, you're using the right edge of a line to start your measurement and the left edge of the ending measurement, and you're just coming up with an inaccurate measurement. There is a technique that experts use when they are measuring design.
That's a good point. You're right. Right.
So that's why I've always, ever since I've been on Facebook and talking to people, I always compare stamps with another known instead of trying to measure. When you're talking about the image of the stamp. That's how I came up with the template. I decided I'm going to have every single measurement, every single type on the template where you don't have to take a ruler that's usually too crude and measure the stamp. It's always better to compare against the known than it is to try to measure, because invariably, unless you've got an extremely fine ruler with small increments, you're probably getting a wrong measurement. So other than that,
Sorry, Steve, real quick note on the expert's book. So I know it's out of print and my copy is, I've used it so much it's almost fallen apart. But at least last time I checked, Paul Schmidt's daughter is selling a PDF of the expert's book, which is just as useful as having the hard copy. So if there are folks online who don't have it, either Google that or send me an email and I'll connect you with her. But I use the digital one these days more than the hard copy.
Oh, wow.
I think every once in a while it shows up on Facebook for around 100 to 125, something like that.
Mhm.
If you go to some of the used book sites, I've seen it advertised anywhere from $200 to almost $1,000.
This is not Micarelli we're talking about. We're talking
No,
about.
Micarelli too. Micarelli, I've
Oh,
seen
right.
up to $1,200 and
No. But I mean, for
Micarelli will be-
watermarking, the watermarking, page 190, so on and so forth. That's the Schmid book.
Yes.
yes,
The Micarelli, just so you know, they just released a new Micarelli and you get it for about $35.
right. Yeah, the new one.
Wow.
So is that Amos that is releasing?
Yes,
that?
yes.
Yeah,
This
yeah,
is
it was out of
also
print for a while. Yeah, there's a nice book by
Armstrong. Yes. I definitely recommend this one as well.
Yeah. But
And
Joel Armstrong, Schmid. There's
Linebarger,
plenty-
if you like the offsets,
Yes.
you get that, the APRL has that for free. You can download it.
Wow.
The the pamphlet that I showed you last time, Andrew, do you have that easily available by any chance?
Linebarger,
Yeah,
yeah. The APS has it for free on their website, but you can, it's right here. It's not very thick. So these are floating around. They're not super expensive, but like I said, the copyright is expired, so the APRL has a version you can download.
who's the author of that?
Donald Linebarger, Lybarger.
In that-
that's a nice pamphlet to have for the offsets.
Yep, it's the till I finish my book, it's the reference for the offsets.
Well,
Yeah.
wait a second. Somebody's writing a book.
Yeah, I think I'm 80% done, but I think the last 20% is going to take more time than the first 80%.
Okay.
If people want Linebarger, my email is in the chat. Send me a note and I'll send you a link where you can download it. It really is a worthwhile book.
Yeah. I
So
need a bastard one.
Since we're reviewing pamphlets and books, what do you think of this one? Tips on Types by Robin Dick.
Can you hold it up a little bit higher?
And closer.
Yeah, closer.
No, it's too close now.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Got
I-
a blur background and it's blurring out.
yeah, I haven't seen that one, Jerry.
Okay,
Well,
for
let
those, for those that want to do the hunt, there's one offered on eBay for $179.
For what? For which
The
book?
expert's book.
Oh, the experts book.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I found my link to the APS's copy of Linebarger. I just put it in the chat if anyone is interested.
And again, all this information is being not only recorded, does the chat also stay up, Heidi, as you can go back and refer to it later? Or does the chat disappear.
It stays up for me. It may stay up in your Zoom where you can still see it there, but I think I can download the chat as well as the recording. So I'll see if I can find that.
Where is
Okay.
the recording going to be kept so we can reach it?
It'll once we finish, the recording will be emailed to me and I'll send it to Stephen and then he can post it. He can post it in the main group, or we could actually probably, it might even be better to download it and then save it somewhere and then share it.
So I just clicked on it while you were talking. It brought the website up. I bookmarked it and saved it. So perfect. Thank you, Andrew. It worked.
My favorite stamp book.
Hey, it's get Kate a
The
point
other,
about
the
where
other
to-
question that I have is if they ever tried to use, what is it, the VSC 6000 to determine watermarks?
I don't know if anybody at APS is qualified yet to use it. They were going to have somebody come down from the company that manufactures them and teach a couple classes during summer seminars last year. But of course, that got canceled and went online, and you can't, that's one course you can't teach online.
Right. I wonder
So-
if anybody knows about that, maybe like at the Smithsonian or the foundation.
I was out there last year and I tried going through the manual and seeing, I couldn't get any new images, but I wasn't very proficient on the machine. I couldn't tell you if I was using it right or not.
Steve,
I've heard the question now several
what
times.
department of
and
the APS bought the machine?
I've heard the question several times, and I don't know anyone at NPM or PF has a VSC 6000. I've worked with VSC 6000 for other purposes, but I don't know of anyone who's done a watermark study with a VSC 6000.
Well, and it can be used on things like passports and things like that for detecting different types of hidden watermarks or hidden printing, but I don't know if it'll detect the type of watermarks that we're talking about with stamps. So, Jerry, you were asking what again? Something about APS?
Yes, which department of APS bought the machine?
Well, I believe it was donated to the expertising department.
It was donated
Yes.
by the company?
I don't know who donated it. They either donated the machine or they donated the money to purchase one, but it went to the expertising department.
Gotcha.
Any other questions on watermarking? Or Andrew, Greg, Bob, any other?
I got a question on going back to the discussion about leaving stamps in the fluid for 5 minutes. I didn't realize that it made any difference if it didn't show right away. That you could leave it in longer and it might show up the watermark. If you get stamps that you think might be on watermark, but possibly watermark, would it be wise to just leave it in the fluid then for 3, 4, 5 minutes?
It's not gonna hurt the stamp.
Yeah, it won't hurt the ink. So if there's a possibility that there is a watermark and you want to be on the safe side, just leave it in the fluid a little bit longer and see if one shows up.
Would you then be fairly confident, say it's on watermark if you don't, even leave it for 5 minutes, you don't see anything? Be pretty confident it's on watermark?
As long as, you know, as long as there's not the possibility of you mistaking a small piece of a watermark along the edge as part of a cancel or something.
I like that.
You know, with the single line watermark, it may just be 2 millimeters or 3 millimeters of a single line that is showing on the edge of the stamp. And if there's the possibility that there is or is not a watermark and you're having the stamp expertized, if it doesn't show or you're not sure it's showing, it's going to be probably certified as whatever is the cheaper of the two.
That's usually my rule of thumb. If I can't identify it, I go with the cheapest one.
Right.
Yeah. What,
Yep.
one other thing I think is occasionally helpful with watermarking stamps is to look at the stamp at 2 points. One's right when you drop it in the fluid, as the fluid is permeating through the stamp, you can help spot creases or occasionally tough watermarks. You'll see sort of a flash for a moment where you can see things, kind of give you a clue to what to look for as you're investigating the stamp. The other one is I find as the stamp is drying, right? You've taken it out of the fluid, you've set it aside. Particularly for creases, it can be helpful to watch that stamp carefully as it dries. You'll see parts of it that dry more quickly or more slowly, and it can point out things that you should focus on if you put it back in the fluid.
That's an excellent point. Watermark fluid is great for finding faults. When you first dip a stamp, a watermark is a thin area of the stamp. So if there are thins that have been created by previous hinges or somebody pulled paper off the stamp and it created a thin, when you put watermark fluid on a stamp and there's a thin, it's going to show up as a dark area. a watermark is a thin essentially, and that's why it shows up as a dark area. As the fluid dries, the watermark fluid is going to evaporate more quickly on the fibers that have been broken in a crease or a tear. Those are, you have more fibers exposed to the air. That's where the fluid is going to dry faster. So a crease or a tear is going to show up as a white line because that's evaporating faster than the rest of the paper, or that area is evaporating faster than the rest of the paper is. So it's great for finding faults, for finding reback stamps or regummed. The stamp either doesn't accept fluid as readily. I'm not sure, Greg, what you know, or Andrew, do you know what, when you have a reback stamp, just what is actually happening? Is it the glue from the stamp is not letting the watermark fluid absorb correctly?
Certainly should take longer.
Takes way longer, yeah.
Yeah, it takes a lot longer. So you can use watermark fluid for more than just looking for a watermark. You should also be using it for looking for faults. You'll find a lot of dealers on eBay or people selling stamps on eBay or Hipstamp haven't got the slightest idea how to check for faults, and they just either don't care or won't describe them. But when you explain how to find a fault, invariably they come back with, oh yeah, I found a crease, or there's a tear or a thin or something like that. But use that watermark for checking for faults too.
In a stamp auction, the reputable ones, the bigger ones, and they describe a stamp, and I don't see them say crease or something in it. But then if you send it to an expert and the expert finds the crease, then you don't have to buy the stamp. Am I right? So my question is, when they list something in the catalog, if it's a valuable stamp, will they watermark it first to check for faults?
They should, but they don't always.
No one here is the
Well,
previous describer for the.
Usually I would suspect that if it's of some value, it already has a certificate.
Yeah.
If the stamp comes back from the cert different than the description, you get your money back. So if there's a crease in the stamp that wasn't specified in the catalog, Siegel will give you your money back.
Yeah, I'm not sure. You may have to buy the stamp first and send it in before. I don't think they'll just take your word that it has a crease.
But
No. What you do is you say, I want to extend it, and they put it. They send it to the expert committee, either the AP or the PF or
PSC.
and then when it comes, then it'll come back to you or them, depending upon how it's set up.
Right. I don't think you have to buy it if it wasn't as described in the auction. I think
if the stamp comes back with a certificate that's different than the description in the auction, with a fold or a crease or other kinds of flaws,
Then
you'll get your money back.
Yeah.
Do auctions usually have a 30-day? Or
The key is to read the terms and conditions, right? You're forming a contract with the auction house. The terms are going to tell you what and they're usually pretty generous. Like auction houses don't want a reputation for selling faulty stamps that aren't described that way, but just take a quick spin through the terms. They're on every auction website and they'll tell you how they handle the.
and I agree with that. That wasn't my question. My question, if a stamp doesn't have a cert and it's a valuable stamp, you think the describer watermarks it to check for problems before describing it?
I think probably they do. I could ask, I know a
Depends
couple
on how many
subscribers, I could
stamps
ask.
they have, right?
You would assume that, but that, again, like with most auction houses, yes, they will give you your money back, but you also need to look at their terms because they're not all the same.
Right, right. I
Yeah.
agree with that 100%. But that wasn't my question. I was asking you.
But
What's
the point,
the,
was
yeah,
asking
they,
if you're
they may
checking
or
for
may
watermark.
not. It's,
I agree with you. Every auction house is different. And right now I bought 5 cent Trans Mississippi, the blue one, has never hinged. And it came back from PSC as hinged. So I'm about to return it. And I have every confidence that I can return.
Yeah,
I
you
think
should-
it's hard to describe general practices because you have auction houses may change their practices over time if they're feeling time pressure or economic pressure, right? I mean,
Yes.
there's some famous auction houses that were really highly regarded and they later on they got in some financial trouble and they sold consignments and didn't pay collectors. So I don't think you can make assumptions. Like you got to protect yourself.
Exactly. Let the buyer beware. And that's
Right.
why it's
Very
so
well
dumb.
said.
That's why it's so dumb for
Caveat
them to
emptor.
consider merging the buyers and the sellers, the APS and the ASDA. They belong as separate organizations. Sorry for a little politicking.
yeah,
I guess the question is whether they can exist as separate organizations, right? Like in a perfect world, they're separate. But if the choice is like combined or not at all, which one would you choose?
I want to just comment real quick because Stephen knows, and I know Ron knows, that last year I had an incident where I bought some coils from an auction house, and I can't say who it's from now. So it's gone to some legal terms. But they said they had their expertiser look at the stamps. They did not. I bought the lot. I sent a couple of them off that were questionable to PSAG. They came back as non-genuine. And I contacted the auction house. The auction house was not going to give me my money back. And so what I did then at that point, I said, listen, would you like me to essentially leave negative feedback in every social media outlet I can get my hands on? And I wasn't doing this in a mean or demeaning manner. I was trying to be professional because at that point I had no other options because I was essentially on the hook for, say, $1,000 worth of coils that I bought that they said were legit and they were not. So long story short, they contacted their lawyer who contacted me. And after I did a lot of expertising and sending some things off to Stephen and Thomas Sanders and a couple other people, sending them documentation, it was only at that point their lawyer had realized that I had enough documentation to fight what they were saying was legit and it was not. But essentially, exactly what you're saying, I could have been essentially screwed and been out that money. But at the same time, did they want to not have their reputation soured, on social media? And I hate it. I didn't want to do it. I did it almost as a threat. It wasn't something I wanted to do. But at that same time, buying coils is dangerous if there aren't certs, period, end of story. And we all know that.
Valid certs. Check the number, make sure they're valid.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, yeah.
I think I said
that's
this
a,
last
that's a
time,
good
but
point.
But I would see, what would you say, 95, above 95% of the uncertified flat plate coils that we look at are not genuine? Maybe higher than 95.
William Crowe said 90% on that video.
Yeah.
I just watched it 2 days ago. 90% of coils are
At least
most likely
90%.
non-genuine.
Where do you find the video? YouTube?
On YouTube, Noble Spirit put it out.
Oh, okay.
I think
I
90%
think
is probably
Oh,
the,
yeah,
conservative.
because Noble Spirit hosted him at the museum, Spelman Museum in Massachusetts. So that's where the video comes from.
There's a part 1 and a part 2 where he gives people will come up, ask him questions on some stamps, they present them to him. But I mean, it's worth sitting down for an hour and a half and listening to both of those videos to hear what he has to say.
yeah, And the question about percentage of coils that could be fake, I think the earlier the coil, the higher the percentage. I think all the flat plate coils have been faked, but the percentage is much higher for the perf 12s than it would be for the perf 10s.
Yeah, fair enough.
Steve, I'm embarrassed that I don't know how to say this right, but is that include those Shermarack coils?
Shermack,
Help me.
Yeah. There-
I really haven't seen
Probably not.
that. I
No.
don't think
Common.
I've had one come through that asking if Shermack had fake perfs. Andrew, have you seen any?
No, I mean, I've seen some discussion of it in the literature. There's some articles about how to spot fake Shermacks, and there's some illustrations, but
Mhm.
Yeah, and
you
I
measure,
think,
if you measure those hyphen holes and they're the right height of hyphen hole, the right width apart, the chances are pretty good that it's good. There's not a lot of fakery of those.
yeah, and I think
I have
it
some
was Scotty
suspicions though.
that had the book, Steve's book called Steve Belasco's book, which is a great book for looking at the
Private perf.
vamps, the private perf material.
Guide to United States Vending and Affixing Machine Perforations.
Yep.
And I believe I bought this one off the Digital Specialist
Mhm.
for about
So-
$45.
Just a comment about Shermack perfs being not valid. The Shermack perf 1, the different, 6, 7, 8, though I've gotten a couple of those that have come back from PF as faked certs, fake perfs, excuse me. So those are more frequently faked than the Shermack 3s.
That's a good point, Bob. My comments were just directed towards the type 3. There's also people are United States Stamp Society members. Velasco wrote a couple of articles in 1982 actually about expertising vending and fixing machine perfs, which are worth reading. You can get those on the website.
As of right now, if you happen to look at eBay and search for private perforations, there's a dealer who's offering numerous examples of all the different private perforations, which makes me kind of suspect.
And they're
How
all
did all
unused.
those turn up at one time?
Correct.
And we're talking multiples, we're talking the blocks of 4, which are what, favor
A lot of blocks.
favor items?
Right.
I'm familiar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a huge number, because every night I search eBay and put in a search for coil and they all pop up. And every different variety of the private vending machine examples are on there. And I mean, there's some of them that are paste ups, which I think have a better shot to be good, but that's not even a sure thing, because they could take an imperf coil and do that to a paste up.
Mhm.
Greg, that could be an eBay seller buying a dealer's stock of his entire private vending purse. I
Yeah,
mean, huge volumes can come on the market very quickly. I've seen it with booklets.
yeah.
I was
I
at
guess
the
it's just kind of
Sarasota
suspicious
show.
when you look at all that.
Yeah, I know
and-
which one, Greg, you're talking about.
Yeah,
There was a bunch of stuff sold last year by in 22 by Kelleher. I forget the name of the New Jersey dealer, but he had huge volumes of this stuff, and that didn't all make it through the auction. So it's that might be a source for it. Plus, this past year there have been 3 or 4 large sales of private first
Yeah,
stamps.
Bob, you may be talking about Bill Lang's. He was a
Exactly.
good example where there's a lot of material coming on the market over an extended period of time.
Yeah.
And at the same time, last year at Sarasota, Irv Miller bought a fairly large accumulation of private perf material. So like he bought the entire collection, and it was quite a bit. So yeah, it probably
Sure.
does come on a large lots at a time.
But a shame on the eBay seller for putting it all up at one time. He's hurting it himself. You gotta salt it, don't shovel it.
Greg, I believe that eBay is the Mike Zimper stamp store. Just so you know, I saw some of this stuff up the other day.
Yeah, I don't know, enough about it to, but it just kind of raises questions when you see that much at one time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we got almost 11 o'clock.
I have one last comment about getting expertized. You also have to be careful that just because there have been items that have been put into collections and large lots that they sell, and of course, when you buy a collection or large lot, there's no returning that per se if you have individual items that are bad.
Right.
And many years ago, there was a auction house in my hometown of Cuyahoga Falls. The auction house is called Herb Latucci's House for Collectors. And he bought a collection in a Greg Manning sale. And in it was a copy of a mint Orangeburg coil single with a photocopy of a certificate from the foundation. And they put it on the front cover of the auction catalog. I went down and looked at it. And I told the guy that worked in the office that said, well, the likelihood that this is genuine and it was in a collection, there's probably 0%. And I said, what you should do is just call the foundation and say, what stamp was issued for that certificate number? And lo and behold, when he called and found out, they said it was a 90-cent banknote. Yes, it was purple, but they did the old whiteout and copy and paste, and they changed. And if you look at, I actually have a copy of it if I can find it at some point. I bought the the fake certificate and the stamp just as a reference as far as what people will go to as far as the extent of making something very rare and valuable to be sold. And even look at some of the typeset, they changed that. And so again, the original copy is very important, and never hurts to do a little research, and call the foundation and say, hey, if you suspect something's wrong, what was this certificate number issued for?
You can also
So,
look at the website
Yeah.
by the number. You can look on the website and see an image.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yep.
Yeah, the PF certificate search is a great research tool.
Yes.
Yeah, I've found several of items that several dealers, big name dealers, they put up material not mentioning that there is a cert available, which usually describes faults of some type, or which is the reason why they're not letting you know that there is a cert for it. But do your homework.
Well, Bill Langs was notorious for that.
Yeah, that's the one I'm thinking of.
So I shouldn't have said it out loud, but I bought something from him where he threw away a bad cert. So
Let me ask you this,
Is that called
do all your-
search shopping?
do all your certificates come back with an embossed seal on it?
As far as I know, they do. They're supposed to.
Okay,
the key, if you're really worried though, is as Heidi said, just look it up on the website. All the expediting agencies have databases online. Just look at that cert there and check it.
okay.
Make sure it matches your stamp. Or reach out to them. They're all collector friendly.
Okay.
Hey,
You know,
Well,
you
some-
mentioned about if the rules of stamp auction houses on searches, that if it has one in the last 5 years, then you can't say, I want to put it in for a cert. And I think that's wrong, because I put something into the Philatelic Foundation before grading. It was the Mercury special delivery stamp. I'm sure Bob could tell me what the E number is. Maybe it's E9, but that was fine. Then I put it into the PSC when grading started, and it came back that it had a rip in it. So I took out my old rangefinder camera photograph of it and the one on the cert from the PF Foundation, which was black and white, and it looks perfect. But if you look at the stamp they sent back to me, it's got a little rip in it. So it got damaged, I believe, by PSC in the transportation from me to them. And it just makes me think that I can't accept the 5-year rule, but I'll cross that bridge when I get to it.
Well. So anything else? Otherwise, probably getting late for the people on the East Coast, but
Yep, I'm gonna have to get going.
yeah,
We
it's
didn't chat early on, Steve. Is there a possibility of moving it a little bit earlier start, like 8:30 or 9?
yeah, it's I can put up a post up on the Facebook group, but we're going to be dealing with West Coast. I had a couple people even mention that they were overseas, and that's only going to be 1 or 2, but they'd be talking about mid-morning hours, where they'd have to, in order to see it online. But I guess to get the most people actively in the meeting, I thought sometime between 8 and 10 would work. Last time we were at 10, this time we were at 9:30. So if we could try 9 and then 8:30 and just see what works best.
I
We
think
start getting that-
half of us are Eastern time here, the people that I'm familiar with. So, yeah. 9 o'clock. I would like to try 9 o'clock next Friday, maybe.
So let's
Are
do
people,
a quick
people
show of
wedded to
hands.
Friday? I guess maybe I'm one of the few non-retired folks here, but I'm usually out with my wife on Friday night.
Yeah, I was gonna say, well, I got 3 young kids and the wife as well too. So, I mean, I could do like an every other Friday or something like that. But yeah, this has been very informative, though. I really appreciate it.
Joseph,
Well,
is a day of the week better than Friday? Joseph?
Well,
I want to know what I need to do to get my wife to go out on Friday nights.
Ah,
Just don't talk about stamps. That's my
How do you
key.
do it, Andrew?
yeah,
No
that's a
stamp,
trick.
no stamp discussion of any kind.
Okay.
No stamps.
Oh, stupid
What
Steve.
time zone? What time zone is everyone in? Raise your hand.
All right.
If
Guys,
you're
I
in
have to go. Well, have a good night.
Be great.
raise your
All
Greg,
right, see ya.
See ya.
Eastern.
Eastern.
Put your hand up for Eastern.
Yeah.
Ron, you're Eastern, aren't you?
No. I'm
Oh, that's
Central.
right. You're
in Illinois.
Sorry.
Say
We should
7
you gotta
Eastern.
speak a little slower. Sorry.
Okay.
I'm normally at work on Friday night, so these are probably the only 2 meetings I'm gonna be at. So I'm looking forward to the recorded session.
Okay. If you're on Central, raise your hand.
If you're on Central, raise your hand.
All right, Mountain. 3.
You got
2
a
mountains.
mountain, and I
Okay.
think
Joseph, raise your
Stephen's
hand.
on.
Mountain.
He's
Wait a
out.
minute. Hey, everybody, hold-
Yes, mountain.
Heidi, can you mute everybody except for you, and then we'll start over?
Yeah, let's do that. All right. That muted me. So let's start over. Eastern time zone, raise your hand. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 Easterns. Okay, let's go to Central time zone. Raise your hand. So there's 4 of us. Okay. Mountain time zone. 2, 3. I see 3. Okay. Pacific. No Pacific. Okay, so that's good. With no Pacific, we could do a little bit earlier. All right, I muted everyone, so each one of you will have to go and unmute yourself, I think.
Ta-da.
Yeah. So you could all go unmute yourself. Okay, so we're gonna do this again. For day of the week, keep in mind, if I'm hosting, I do have a lot of night work I do. So we may have to change hosts if we choose a different day of the week, unless it's on the weekend. But we're gonna try anyway.
I like Heidi as a host. Let's work around her schedule.
I do
Heidi,
I'm in IT and we do network cutovers and we always do them at night. So Monday,
Heidi,
Thursday.
can we do Sunday night? Is Sunday night a compromise?
Yeah, as long as it doesn't go too late because people have to work the next day. So
Well, let's try the same thing, Heidi.
Yeah,
Use-
Sunday works.
Use any day as one of the possibilities and then maybe go through the days of the week that people might think is works best.
all right. So everybody vote, get ready. I'm gonna mute everybody one more time and we'll start with Sunday. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 Sundays. That's good. All right, Monday. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, 6. Okay, so 7 Sunday. Let me write this down because I'm gonna run out of spaces in my head. Sunday we had 7 and Monday we had 6. Okay, Tuesday. It's a good day for you. Just raise your hand. Tuesday. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. It's okay to raise your hand more than once during the week. Questions? Wednesday. 5 on Wednesday. All right. Thursday. You can tell who's retired. I'm seeing a pattern here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 on Thursday. All right. Friday. All right. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 Fridays. All right. Saturday, last day of the week. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. All right. 8 Saturdays. All right. If you feel like you missed your day, you can unmute and tell me if you really want to weigh in on another day.
I didn't vote for any day. I'm retired and I can make any one of them.
Awesome. Okay, good to hear. I'm like Andrew, I also am not retired. So my nights are pretty busy these days.
I'm not retired, but my wife's in the other room watching Hallmark movies, so I just close the door. I'm finding my stamp den. I'm available any night.
Oh, that's awesome. All right.
Okay.
All right, Heidi, I'll get with you later.
Yeah. Okay. Looks like Friday, Saturday, and Sunday had the most votes, so it'll be one of those days.
Okay.
I like Sunday.
Keith, which days did you vote for? You have to unmute
Oh,
yourself.
yep, got to unmute.
Thought I did. Saturday or Sunday.
Okay.
Okay, good. Andrew, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, weekends are best. I can probably make weeknights work, but it's hit or miss.
Okay. Stephen, I know you're retired. Who else are our true experts here?
Well, Greg
He's retired.
is, but he drives. I don't know how long. He's probably, I would think weekends would probably be best for him, although I don't know how long his shift is when he drives.
Okay.
Saturday's impossible for me. I do a radio show.
Okay. All right. Well, we will definitely get together and decide, and we'll send out notices. And I'm going to stop recording now. I think that we are near the end.
Yep.
All right.